Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 CES panel brought to you by Abbott on athlete health, tech, and safety. I'm Pam Nisevich-Bede. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm a certified specialist in sports dietetics, 27-time marathoner and an author. And my current area of research is biowearables and personalized metabolic coaching with Lingo, biowearable from Abbott. And I will be your panel moderator today. We are very excited to be here to talk about how emerging health tech is improving athlete health and safety. We know that sports and health are inextricably linked, and our understanding of health and safety and this convergence is rapidly evolving and rapidly changing. And so with the support of healthcare providers, new innovations, and athletes now have the access to tech that can help them prevent and identify and recover from health issues. And we're really working to give them an easier path to unlock their potential, both on the field and in the rest of life. The primary driver of this evolution is that convergence of health and tech, and it's powered by data, it's powered by cutting-edge science, and it's powered by innovation and the experts behind those innovations. Technology is giving us this power to digitize and democratize and decentralize healthcare so that we can give that information back to the athlete, back to the individual, and empower them to know what's going on in their own body so they can make the right changes that work for them. So with all this information coming at us, it's really important that we're fostering partnerships between teams and leagues and athletes and healthcare providers and health institutions and health businesses so that we can bring the right technology and the right advice to our athletes and to all of our audience. So in the spirit of collaboration and conversation, we've got a really great panel set up for you today. Leading experts and professionals in sports health, we're going to discuss the full spectrum of athlete safety and how technology is really a true game changer. We're going to chat about identification, prevention, and recovery from injury or other health conditions that come through. And we have a wonderful session, and I'm going to introduce our panel. I'm very excited about all the experts that are joining me up on stage today. First, we've got Beth McQuiston. She is a board-certified neurologist. She's a registered dietitian, medical director for Abbott's diagnostic business. Her current area of focus includes research into biomarkers for use in traumatic brain injury, or TBI, including concussions. Next is Dr. George Champus. He is an attending physician at Northwestern Memorial Hospital Emergency Department, Chief Medical Officer and Medical Chairman of CONCACAF, Team Physician for the Chicago Bears and the Chicago Blackhawks, Chief Medical Officer for the United States Soccer Federation, and Chief Medical Officer for one of my favorite races, the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. I also ran into him in the gym this morning, and I don't know how he has time for all of those positions as well as joining our panel, but I'm glad he's here today. David Weiss is the Senior Vice President, Player Matters of the National Basketball Association. David leads all player health and anti-drug matters for the NBA and its affiliates, including health programs related to injury data and analytics programs, a league-wide electronic medical record system, infectious disease, cardiac screening, concussion, and league health and performance-related committees, including the Wearables Committee and NBA's Sports Science Committees. You guys are all very busy individuals. Finally, we've got Dr. Nico Mihic, who has worked with Real Madrid Football Club since 2017, partnering with players across the men's, women's, and academy teams. Dr. Nico holds several other noteworthy roles, including being the Director of Executive Health Program for Hospital de Madrid, physician for the British Air Force and American Section NATO, as well as medical advisor for Air France and KLM. So I would like to welcome all of our panelists to the stage. Very glad you're here with us today. So we're going to break this panel up into three sections. We're going to tell the full story of how technology is impacting athlete health and safety. Again, whether it's preventing injury, identifying them, or recovering from injury. We're going to talk about how tech and health are really intertwined. So my first question is going to be for Dr. McQuiston. You know, Beth, we know that the easiest way to get over an injury is to prevent it from happening. And new innovations in health tech give athletes a window into their bodies and allow all of us healthcare practitioners to really understand what's going on. So why are you so passionate about health tech and the power it has to keep our athletes safe?
Pam, you are spot on. The best injury is no injury. So at Abbott, we are proudly building a future where we have these connected technologies that can serve to give precise information and personalized information to these athletes, because every athlete has its own language inside. And what these wearable technologies and biowearables do is they help decode what's happening and make the invisible visible. And then we can use that information to translate that into meaningful improvements for these athletes. For example, we can take this information and monitor glucose so that if someone's glucose is dipping down, you can course correct to optimize performance. When we look at this with these athletes, you want to make sure that you have prevention of injury and then also health optimization. People have been training long and hard to do their absolute best, and that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, sometimes that tech, especially the biowearables, when you can see where those energy levels are, or if you can see that the athlete's becoming a little more run down, that's a big part of preventing that injury from happening.
One other thing I wanted to add, Pam, too, is in addition to checking for things like glucose, we can also, with the biowearables, tell whether the athlete should go back to the field at all or whether they need to stay off.
Yes, that's helpful because every athlete's end goal is to get back onto that field as fast as possible and not to leave it in the first place. Dr. Mihich, how have you helped athletes that you work with, some of the most fantastic soccer players or football players in the world, use technology to understand their bodies and also optimize performance but prevent that injury?
The wearable technology goes a long way, the latest and the greatest, and I think we're just beginning with it. I brought some slides, if you can see them, just to illustrate this. So wearable technology is a device that gathers data. So we had our team wear a sensor, Super Sapiens sensor, for a specific game. All the players wore it. And I'm going to show you 3 examples why it makes sense. This game is at 8 p.m. They all eat, which is almost impossible to avoid at the same time, 3 or 4. They all eat pretty much the same things: chicken, some carb, pasta, rice, potatoes, and vegetables. And their response when game comes on, in terms of the glucose, is incredibly different. So here's a player. See, first half, second half. It takes him about 5-6 minutes to get really good glucose levels. He performs at an optimum level the whole game. And as the last bit of the game starts to fade out, and we exchange him. So this is a perfect example. The next slide, if you can put it, is this same meal, same game. They eat exactly the same thing at the same time. This guy is a goalie. And you can see he takes a significant dip as the game starts. We don't get too many kicks on the goal because we managed to keep the ball most of the time during most of the games. So his adrenaline level is a little bit lower initially, but then as he gets closer to halftime, he kicks it up. And then, again, he has a huge dip in the second half. There was a ball that was kicked at him during this dip in his glucose levels. What happens there is his concentration is low, his reflexes are less, and it's a miracle that we didn't get scored on. So we had him quickly drink up some concoction from Abbott for sure. I don't know if it's Ensure or Pedialyte or something, but obviously sugar levels went up. And the third guy, if you can see that. Can you put on the next slide? This is remarkable. This guy's, again, remember, they're eating the same stuff, same time. He comes to the game not in competitive energy levels. It takes him a good half or 3/4 of the first half to get into a reasonable level. The second half, he just becomes non-competitive. He just drips down. And what did we do? We had to take him off. There was no way he was going to recover enough to be competitive. So I think this is a clear, you know, a picture is good as 1,000 words. This is a clear example how wearable technology helps us improve the players. When players get this, they appreciate it, they want to use it, they want to get better with it. It's just a natural consequence.
The interesting thing for the biowearable technology and this continuous glucose tracking is before we had, you know, just snapshots in time as to what glucose was doing, and we made assumptions that glucose stayed fairly steady unless you were concerned about diabetes. But because we have, you know, more that minute-to-minute glucose, we know what glucose is doing, right? And when we look at graphs like that, previously we might have thought an athlete was not fit, or perhaps they had a bad night of sleep, or there was another factor going on. But when you have this data at hand and you can see, oh, is my glucose, and I just need to think through nutrition or maybe think through hydration or other factors, but we can really help athletes optimize. And it's really interesting in that you've got 3 athletes, the response was so strikingly different, you know, both before the game and also during the game, with similar meals.
Those are the 3 most, you know, dramatic examples. I mean, everybody has a different curve. Most of the curves belong, but these are the guys with whom we made the goalie and the third player. We made a significant contribution to his, call it fitness level, but he's super fit. You know,
Yep.
the guy's 23 years old, as fit as he gets for his performance level.
Yep. So, Dave, the NBA is also implementing a lot of tech that supports player health and player performance. Can you share trends or key learnings that you're seeing and how you're incorporating that into athlete, whether it's safety or performance or health?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very topical right now. I know we were talking before, and so for those of you who follow the NBA, there's this big conversation right now going on around load management, and really what's happened, you know, over 10 years or as team medical staffs and, you know, players' own medical staffs and performance staffs have grown, there's been an effort to, you know, really reduce injuries. We haven't really seen that very much in 10 years, and one of the strategies has been this idea of managing load, whether that's overall training load or maybe it's more specific to biomechanical or physiological load. And so a lot of the data that drives that allows it to be personalized, is tech-driven, whether that's from wearables or recovery modalities or biomarkers, and then there's platforms that facilitate the integration of that. And so even just as recently as yesterday, we sent teams sort of a report on 10 years of looking at load management, and we work with a group of epidemiologists, and this includes a lot of, like in 2017, 18, what we would have said was machine learning. Now it's more, you know, machine learning AI. But just looking at, you know, do we actually see reductions in injuries from load management when we look at different cuts of players? And we haven't really seen that. And so what that leads us to think is we need, you know, more and better assessments, and we can talk about that more, but whether that's more on the recovery side or the biomechanics or sleep is certainly one, to really understand better what drives that injury rate. And I think technology is going to be the thing that allows us to do that.
Nice, very nice. George, kind of we're thinking through prevention, and we're also thinking through identification, right? So you work with a myriad of athletes, whether it's hockey, soccer, my favorite sport, running, and soccer. But what technologies are you seeing, or what technologies are you utilizing across a lot of different leagues that are really contributing to that athlete's safety, but also, you know, identifying injury when it does occur?
Yeah, I think, Pam, you know, when you look across sport, and the theme is that athletes, and this is elite athletes to 50,000 runners that run marathons in Chicago or anywhere around the world, they're all hearing more and more their own individualized makeup. And we're saying that now. And I think technology is really unlocking that to be able to really prescribe for them what works best. And we've used the word optimization, but I would just pose this, you know, to everyone in the room. When you look at sport today across soccer, football, gender differences, we throw that word optimization, but truly that is what is occurring. The game is faster, the games are faster, people are running faster. This year we shattered the men's race. We set the second fastest time in the women's race, and not by seconds, by minutes. And so the question is technology and individualizing what works best for them, whether it be glucose, whether it be your recovery, whether it be sleep, is all driven by data on that individual to best optimize them. And I think that is the theme that we're seeing in these athletes, where they're, one, much more educated. They're much more inclined to ask questions about themselves. And the third thing is they love to compete. And so teams typically, the players will come after training and say, show me my numbers, right? And how did that person do? And what was my high speed running? And what was my accelerations today? And that just fuels a lot of the topics and our ability to think, how do we even go further in that? And I think that those are the themes that I'm seeing across sport and across athletes.
That's helpful. Can you speak a little bit towards when we think through data and we think through identification, we also think through speed but accuracy. What kind of tools are you using across these data to really make sure that should the athlete have questions or medical concerns, what tools are you using to really address that? Because I feel like as a sports dietitian, the most common question I get is on hydration, right? And it's a little bit alarming when it's right before race day and someone's like, what do I drink tomorrow? And I'm like, could we have had this conversation a while ago? But it's really, because it needs to be personalized, So what tools are you using to personalize identification as well as what your treatment plan would be?
So you're talking about on the identification of injury. Well, what I could share is, 15, 20 years ago in marathon medicine and endurance space globally, we actually, and myself and a partner, published the athlete collapse algorithm. And when you run 26.2 miles and you stop running, first of all, there's a compilation of things that can happen. One, after you run 26.2 miles, your calves and your lower extremities are essentially your heart. They're basically pumping blood to perfuse your brain. Once you stop, that all basically just pools and you become lightheaded and you could collapse. But there's a small fraction of collapse after running 26.2 miles that is absolutely potentially deadly. And that includes being hyponatremic, meaning dropping your salt content, hypoglycemia, heat stroke, and then the worst thing, a sudden cardiac arrest. And so when you have 50,000 participants, trying to rapidly diagnose who has that is a challenge. 15, 20 years ago, we would say if there was a collapse, there's an algorithm, are they confused, not confused, and then we would try to see, did they lose too much weight or not? What has transformed this for us, and I go back to think about how did we even do this 15, 20 years ago, is technologies. So a runner comes in who's collapsed, nonverbal, it will throw a cardiac monitor on them. We have point of care testing through Abbott and the iStat device, which immediately allows in a confused individual to rapidly be able to get their sodium, get their troponin, identify if they have heat stroke or not, and really objectively be able to rapidly be able to provide care to them, which quite frankly has saved lives. And it's not just about the elite runners, it's about 50,000 participants and times that across the world, which has allowed the running community to go about this in a much safer way. And now it's become the standard in marathon medicine.
Nice, very nice. Beth, you work on some of this technology. So how, in your perspective, how has that safety and that testing evolved over time? And can you speak to the role of a lot of that tech across what you're seeing across different sports?
Sure. So one thing I wanted to highlight was George and I worked at the same hospital in Chicago over 20 years ago, and we used to watch the marathon runners going past, and we didn't have all of this. So we had to wait till they were brought to the emergency department, and then George would patch everybody up. Now we have all of this amazing biowearables to prevent problems before they occur. And one of the new things that has come out, and as a neurologist, I'm so excited about this, is we now have a blood test to assess brain injury on our Abbott point-of-care Alinity device. It's phenomenal. We also have it on our Core Lab platform. Who would have thought we could measure brain proteins in the peripheral blood? And why does this matter? Well, we have a lot of athletes, that have a concussion or they fall or they injure their head and they're not sure how bad it is. Are they okay? Can they go back in the game? And previously, we would ask them questions like, you're assessing for amnesia. So you would literally ask people, do you remember if you forgot anything? Which isn't very helpful. And then you ask them to do a series of commands, make a fist, close their eyes. And now that we have an objective FDA-cleared blood test, you have this information at your fingertips, which makes it just so powerful. And if you look at all the other organ systems in your body, your heart, your liver, your pancreas, they all have blood tests. We've never had a blood test to assess brain injury until now. And just to scope that problem at least half of people that have concussions that even go into an emergency department are being missed because it's difficult without objective information to pick that up. But now that we can measure these brain proteins in the peripheral blood, we have this amazing tool to give to our emergency room physicians to help optimize brain recovery.
That's amazing, and it sounds like you're bridging the gap between that, very subjective, how many fingers am I holding up, to that more costly and sometimes inaccessible CT scan, which neither one is perfect. Do you see a world where as an athlete and as a mom, I'm like, can we have that on the sidelines someday? Do you see a world like that?
I'm glad they brought that up. So the head CTs most of the time are going to be negative, even mild injury, and that doesn't mean they didn't have a brain injury. It just means you can't see blood or a fracture of their skull, but it doesn't mean they didn't have brain injury. Our hope for the future is that this blood test is going to be available everywhere people need it. So, in the ambulance or in schools or on sidelines or in nursing homes, wherever people are getting injured, falling right at the patient's side.
I mean, thinking about how technology facilitates both the personalization and the quantification, I think that's really important for us, because one of the things we think about a lot, and I'm sure at Madrid also, players are getting care in a unique environment through their workplace, and trust is a really important part of that. Borrowing this line from someone else at Columbia who told me this recently, but like when you think about public health, change moves at the speed of trust, and we spend a lot of time with the Players Association, thinking about how do we build confidence in this team approach to healthcare in their workplace at the end of the day. And I think that technology-driven personalization, quantification, and then communication, putting a front-end app on an EMR where players and team physicians can be looking at the same thing and pull up their MRIs, just simple things like that can really improve that communication, that trust with athletes.
Yeah, and better rapport between player and healthcare practitioner and teams. That makes sense. Dr. Mihich, future thinking, at Real Madrid, you've got access to some amazing innovation and amazing technology. But what are some of the greatest unknowns you're seeing in sports health that if you had a wish list, we would solve for in the future?
It's too big to. Where do you start?
You have a long list?
For example, there's so many things we don't know. ACL is a devastating injury. We know how it happens. He jumps the wrong way, twists his ankle, gets tackled. But we don't know why it happens. Is there preparation? Is it a night's sleep? It is a nutrition level. It's a devastating. Is it the footwear? Is it the turf? So the why is very pertinent now. Other unknowns. Women's sports. Why do women get so much more ACL injuries? Why do they get so many more concussions than men?
Yeah.
We just don't know. What happens, the other thing I think we should not forget is the athlete, once they step out of the limelight. We're all interested in what's going on while they're playing. What happens the day they recover? What happens to their health, to their cardiac muscle when it's not being stressed? And certainly the mental aspects of it, the humanitarian aspects of dealing with an ex-athlete. There are a lot of things we still should do and better. But where do you start?
Yeah, where do you start? Yeah, there's again a long list. I think there's just a lot of white space for future innovation and wish lists, and what analytes are we going to look at, and how do we really personalize that healthcare? Because athletes want it in the palm of their hand, but also helping them understand what that data means. It's the so what behind a lot of that data that we're all responsible for.
And Pam, I think, and I'm curious what others' thoughts are, but we've talked about blood markers and different technologies that may look at heart rate and temperature, but I think that there's still probably an untapped, with regards to interstitial fluid, continuous monitoring, not just glucose, but other metrics that we still haven't even thought about.
Right.
And in the real time. So if you check someone's lactate after you're running the marathon, but can you have your lactate as you're running to really guide you as to do I push or not?
Right.
Right? Is today a day that I could do that? I think those are some things to think about. I think genetics and genomes is what is your what could be your sport? Are you this fast twitch, slow twitch? What is the pathway that optimizes you? And you know, we talk about women's health and female health. You know, most of the studies that we have are not in that space. And so now that you see, you know, the growth of the women's game in soccer, the growth of the women's game in the NBA, I think it is just a matter of time for us to really understand what that world looks like. And how do we support women to be able to optimize themselves as well? And so I think I'm very excited to see what the future is going to hold.
I am too. Thinking through the really that optimization, when we do think through recovery, and we're kind of transitioning towards from prevention or identification, prevention over to recovery. When that injury does occur, Dave, I'm curious from like a NBA perspective, what kind of data, what kind of analytics are you using to get that athlete back onto the court as fast as possible, and what does that personalization look like?
Yeah, I think recovery is another pretty wide open space where teams have different practices and there are a lot of technologies involved, and we spend a lot of time thinking about how can that be a little more quantified, protocolized, but also individualized. And so whether it's through biomechanics, motion capture and force plates, measures of strength, measures of functional movement, I think those are all post-injury, interesting recovery. And then there's also the day-to-day recovery of just our schedule, the travel, the sleep, nutrition. So those are all big areas. I mean, as one example, so we have a new motion capture system this year, new player tracking system with Hawkeye. And so we've gone from what used to be one center of mass point per player 20 times a second to 28 pose points 60 times a second. Obviously that's fully driven by technological improvements and better computer vision. And so pairing that with now something we have in our new CBA to do also lab-based biomechanics, and there's a big data science project to put that all together. But those are the kind of things where then if you can get those better, more quantifiable baselines, monitor changes, then when someone's coming back from a recovery standpoint, you've got better objective data to try to really make decisions around that for the team staff who are doing that.
Very nice. George, you were speaking about something similar yesterday in that you're really personalizing recovery across U.S. soccer for all of us fans in the room. Can you tell us kind of what that looks like, and then also what your conversation is with athletes who are trying to push through too fast through that recovery? What does that look like?
So I mean, U.S. soccer, I mean, we're a little bit different than, let's say, a club team because we're a traveling show. I mean, we're going to travel anywhere around the world, and we want to try to bring those same modalities to those players. And so the best example would be the World Cups for the men and women. And so for the men in Qatar and for the women in New Zealand, we had a room the size of this room that was solely for recovery and performance. And so we outfitted with hyperbaric, infrared, cryo, a weightless bed. And within those elements, depending on the day's training and depending on that individual's sleep overnight, their RPE or rated perceived exertion for that day's training, match day -1, match day +1, there was an individualized approach for them with regards to which modalities they were going to use. And again, it takes time, it takes trust. It takes proving it objectively that this makes a difference for you. And so those are just some insights with regards to what we've started to do on the men's and women's national team. We are looking to try to do that in some scalable fashion for our youth national teams. And I think that's, when you look at that, I think those are the bridges that you're seeing across sport, which is allowing sport to grow globally. But without question, you're going to start seeing more and more of that in the general population. Everybody is going to be seeking whether they're wearing a ring, how did I wake up, how did I sleep last night, and that's going to drive greater and greater technology.
And is that recovery process, all the data that you've got at hand, is that helping personalize every single athlete's recovery on a different day, depending on what the load was?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share, what I could share with you is that our entire staff, medical and performance staff, every night, and I'm sure this happens now across, all teams and in all sports, sit down with every player up there, and their baseline, and you get a sense of what that day looked like, and then you schedule what their session's going to be the next day. That's never happened, that wasn't occurring 15, 20, 25 years ago. No chance. And so it's a detailed prescription, and there's times you may not get it completely right. You're going to work with your coach to say, today we need this type of day, and then afterwards you're going to say, did we hit those metrics? And that's, I think, really what you're seeing in sports, and technology is allowing us to capture the data to say, are we doing that?
Very nice.
I really just want to point out that's really, people who work in the ER really know that one of the most delicate moments is that transfer of care.
Yeah.
When you end your shift and you hand it over to the next guy, and if you don't do the proper job right there, that's as bad as missing an obvious MI or
All the work
something.
you did just goes to waste.
Yeah, and so it really goes to say that transfer of care, point to point, is way beyond what we used to do, and it's hugely important for the players to do.
And on that level, how's technology helping you feel like comfortable enough that the athlete is recovered so they can return to field?
Yeah, well, never.
Never?
It's the safest places to be on the couch, watch the game off the TV. Obviously, it doesn't happen. It's a very complicated, multifactorial problem. I think really there's a huge void in the industry that you might get interested in terms of setting recovery standards. When is the player fit to return to play? Is it the same day as the first day of the season? And it's always a relationship that involves the player, the coaching staff, the physician, the magnitude of the game that we play. Do players play hurt? Yes. Do they try to hide the injury because they always want to play all of them? Yeah. And then you have to follow certain guidelines that are set up by the leagues. So when is the player fit? I think that's to return to play is really a big void in terms of there's not an industry standard that everybody follows.
I think, just if I could add one thing, I mean, I think also related to that, another big part of recovery, particularly post-injury, that we spend a lot of time thinking about, but there's still some white space for technology and quantification is around, we've been talking about the physical aspects of recovery, but whether it's the mental health and wellness aspects, pain, neurocognitive aspects, which are maybe a little more quantified. We have a working group on pain, for example, right now, and that's a big part of the whole overall recovery process post-injury, and somewhere where I think there will be a lot of opportunities long-term to look at how we can bring in technology to make the process more transparent, to quantify it more, to make it more individualized.
That makes sense. There's a lot of spokes on that recovery wheel for sure to take into account. Beth, kind of closing up our conversation, what do you see as the promise for health and tech when it comes to athletes?
First, and I want to say what a great job, what an elite group, and thanks for moderating, wonderful. The future is now. So we're talking about the future. We are doing so much. There's so many advancements that have happened with the bio-wearables, and they're really helping us take the guesswork out of what's happening with the athletes and taking away that ambiguity and giving objective, rapid, personalized, convenient information so that people can course correct immediately, which is going to lead to prevention of injury, and it's going to lead to optimization and taking athletic performance absolutely through the roof to the next level. And then I really wanted to dig into the topic about women, leave everybody with that thought. We are optimizing for women. Women are not men, and we have different health issues, and there's more technology to optimize women in sports, which is really exciting. And it's absolutely critical that Abbott, we're partnering with the best and the brightest, for example, Real Madrid, and we're optimizing with them hand in hand, using these technologies and these bio-wearables, performance and treatment and recovery and nutrition, so that everyone can play to their absolute best in the safest way possible.
That's awesome.
So the future's now, Pam.
That's right. It's across this panel, thank you all for sharing your insights and your time. It's really encouraging to hear how far we've come, over the past, you always say 15 to 20 years, and really the future is now, and where will we be next year or 5 years at this time. We've spent a lot of time talking about that full spectrum of athlete safety, and really the most satisfying thing about athlete safety and performance is that comeback story. And there's just so much power and emotion behind a comeback story, a recovery from injury. So we're going to close today with an athlete who's really exemplified what a comeback looks like, and that's Damar Hamlin. A lot of our work at Abbott is in that cardiovascular space, that full human health space. And Abbott recently announced a partnership with Damar to launch the HeartMates program. It's focused on building a community of people who have been impacted by heart issues. And so it's not just an N of one, it's that full community that Damar and Abbott are working to establish to give support to individuals with heart issues and concerns. So we're going to end the day today with a campaign launch video with Damar. But before we go to that, I just want to again thank our panelists for your amazing insights and sharing. I always love to see what's going on behind the scenes because we always want to know what's going on with the NBA and Real Madrid and U.S. soccer and all the the Chicago Bears. We could talk about that later. But thank you so much for sharing those insights. It was awesome to have you guys here today. Thank you.
No one ever predicts or wants heart health to be an issue that they experience in any type of capacity.
What's up, bro?
To be directly affected from it, it allows me to relate to what they're going through and what they're experiencing. Maybe I can inspire people to make an impact and make a change. Football has been one of my passions since I was a kid. I started playing at 5 years old. It's had the biggest impact on who I am because you learn so much having a team. There's going to be long days, hard days, fun days. That's what makes a good team. Everybody being together for a common goal.
Abbott's launching its HeartMate program in partnership with Damar Hamlin. This initiative creates a community for patients with cardiovascular disease.
What's up, man?
And this community allows them to connect with other people,
Got a game?
to share their experiences,
Sweeney, what's up?
and understand that you can live with heart disease.
Alexis, what's up, man?
Not feeling like it's something that you have to deal with on your own,
You gotta get back in the lab.
but to have someone to relate to you and give you those steps ahead of your journey.
You gotta do everything to protect it. Yeah.
This is me passing my blessings on, saving generations to come.
With Abbott, we believe that living longer is important, but so is living better.